1,000 career yards in the postseason will face off next weekend when Tampa Tom and the Bucs head to the Big Easy to face Drew Brees and the Saints, who had this to...
I mentioned this last week. Think about the most the most valuable trading commodities in the NFL. Who has the most value? Patrick Mahomes, because Aaron Rodgers is 37. Russell Wilson's 32. Patrick Mahomes is number one. He's better than those guys anyway, I believe. He's number one. Who's number two? I think it's Deshaun Watson. I think other than Mahomes, he is the most valuable in that way piece in the NFL. You don't consult him. He finds out through the media that his receiver, who's one of the best ever, at least one of the best sets of hands ever, and his boy gets traded. Not only do you not consult him about the GM, but you pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to a firm that recommends a GM, and instead you turn that guy down and make a last-second decision, and Deshaun Watson's totally out of the loop? No, to hell with that. I mean, really, other than Watson, you have Josh Allen, who's also great and young, and I would say Justin Herbert, who's, by the way, still on his rookie deal, and by next year might be pushing those guys. He's so talented. But when you're maybe the second most valuable commodity in the game, and they treat you that way, get out of there.
Houston, we have a problem. And I will say this, and I say this in all seriousness, Ryan, especially to you, I say this on this show right now because it's something important that happened. They say that Deshaun Watson is happy for a lot of the reasons that Max just articulated. But in the end, what it comes down to is that Deshaun Watson has a problem with this organization in the direction that it's going in. The fact that Miami is a desired destination. They have an African-American GM in Chris Greer and an African-American coach in Brian Flores. They're the only team in the National Football League who has that, along with Stephen Ross and the things that he's done from a philanthropic standpoint in the community as it pertains to the African-American community. Think about that as the owner for the Miami Dolphins. Think about that. It's one thing to want out of Houston because of their clear ineptitude. It's one thing to want out of Houston because Bill O'Brien traded away your boy DeAndre Hopkins. It's another thing entirely in the aftermath of social justice issues and what have you, with Deshaun Watson having spoken out against those things, with stories leaking that he doesn't believe the organization gets it. And he is a top quarterback in the National Football League who happens to be black, who you just invested $156 million to. And he believes that you, as an organization, are desensitized or desensitive or not sensitive enough to the issues that are percolating in our society. And he's using your actions as an organization, who you've hired, who you've fired, who you've let go, who you've kept on board, et cetera, et cetera. These are the things that he's saying. And then when you point out where he wants to go to, you see that he's a conscientious observer, not just an elite football player. When you combine that with the fact that the great J.J. Watt, and I'm talking about the greatness of J.J. Watt, the player, and the greatness of J.J. Watt, the person. We know what kind of person he's proven to be. It's well documented. He probably wants out too. If you're the Houston Texans organization, you need to understand that the nation, the football world, is looking at you right now as an organization, and they've got some serious question marks about who you are. This is not Deshaun Watson just, I'm just not happy because we had a 4-12 season. That's not what he's done. They've lost before. They've missed the playoffs before. This is not just about that. This is something extra. And it tells me that there's something going on in Houston where essentially they've got the mentality, shut up and dribble. Not literally, of course, because this is football. But in other words, you're an athlete. We pay you to play, shut up, play, and leave the decision-making to us. That's what everything points to right now when it comes to the Houston Texans, which means that if Deshaun Watson keeps making noise about this, there's a whole bunch of people that ain't going to want to have anything to do with that organization.
Stephen A., I think it's so important that you pointed those things out about Miami, right? Because the first thing anybody hears when they hear he wants to go to Miami is what? Oh, it's Miami. Why would
South
anyone
Beach
want to go play there, right? And then you think about Greer as the GM. You think about Flores as the head coach and Deshaun Watson understanding these things. You think about where the Houston Texans as a family and as an organization, as an ownership group, stood during the social injustice, not allowing the inmates to run the prison. And now I think people don't necessarily understand the situation between Cal McNair and Deshaun Watson. So here's the situation. Deshaun Watson is not saying that you should have treated him any differently. Deshaun Watson is saying you should have kept your word. Right? Because people are going to throw it back. Well, he's just a football player. He's just a quarterback. They don't owe him anything. No, they don't. But they do owe him honesty. And if you go to the man and say you are going to be involved in this process, we will keep you up to date with the things that are happening, then that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be a man of integrity. You're supposed to be a man of your word if you're Cal McNair. And then when you hire a firm, and that firm has two minorities, Omar Khan, who I know very well, who works for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who's from New Orleans, by the way, and Louis Riddick are the two top guys they give you, and you say, you know what, scrap that. I'm going to go with Nick Castellari from the New England Patriots because that's what I feel. Casario, because that's what I feel, right? Because that's what's familiar. And when you're Deshaun Watson and you see these things and you've spoken up for Eric Bieniemy, you understand that there were two minority candidates that were ahead of the candidate that was actually picked to run your team. You can only feel one way. You can only feel that this isn't a place that puts you first. This isn't a place that not only prioritizes you as a player, but doesn't prioritize you as a person. And when you see things like that going on, you want out. When you're a guy who rode on a bus to play a game because you couldn't breathe, because your lung was punctured, and you've given this team not only everything you possibly could as a quarterback, but everything you possibly could as a person, you deserve better. And when you have the type of cachet and you have the type of leverage that Deshaun Watson has, you got to use it. And this is his time.
Well, not just that, Ryan Clark, it's also this reality as well. You got to remember, Bill O'Brien, even though he was at Penn State, he ultimately comes from that New England tree. And what have the Texans been accused of? Trying to be Patriot wannabes, wannabe Patriots, rather. That's where Casario comes from. Now, I don't know the man personally. I don't know anything about his resume. You take them at their word. But the reason why it's so important to point that out was because Bill O'Brien, no matter what kind of football reason he tried to come up with, all indications pointed to him not having the best relationship with DeAndre Hopkins.
Yes.
And that is why DeAndre Hopkins is in the Arizona Cardinals uniform. Well, what about Deshaun Watson? Not only is that his boy, they both came from the same university at Clemson, both played for Dabo Swinney and all of this other stuff, both all-world players. But one's a wide receiver, one's the quarterback, and they were that tight. Why would you disrupt that chemistry? There's no excuse for it. So what you're thinking of, if you get somebody like Casario to come in, and he's from that Patriots tree, if you're Deshaun Watson, it's entirely plausible that you're thinking this is more of the same with the whole Bill O'Brien ilk. So I'm in for more of what I've been dealing with all of these years. Why would I want my future to be about that?
Yeah, it seems that McNair, that the owner of the Texans relies heavily on relationships behind the scenes. It seems to me that maybe could explain some of this stuff. But as you both pointed out, when you hire a firm and pay them hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they don't even have the guy you wound up hiring on their list. But the guy they did recommend is not only very experienced, but is a person of color. And is up for the job that is, in a capacity that is where you see people of color sorely underrepresented. Obviously, your quarterback, who is same, will maybe have feelings about that. I know I would.
Yeah. Well said, Max. We got one more debate I want to get to here, guys. And this one is two of the 7 quarterbacks in NFL history who have thrown for 5,000 career yards in the postseason.